Plug-in hybrids, PHEVs. On paper, they're perfect. EV range for daily trips, gas engine for long drives. Best of both worlds. Manufacturers love them, regulators love their test numbers, brochures love to say things like 1.5 liters per 100 kilometers or 120 MPGe. But if you look at them like an engineer instead of a marketing target, you start seeing something else. Two complete drivetrains stuffed into one car. Too many failure loads, too much weight, too much complexity for what most owners actually get out of them. Plug-in hybrids are not useless. Used perfectly, they can be brilliant. The problem is that the design itself is an engineering nightmare when you care about long-term durability, real-world usage, and total cost of ownership. I'm GearHead. I don't care what trend is hot. I care where torque goes, where heat builds, what breaks at 150,000 miles, and who pays for it. If you want to see PHEVs the way an engineer does, not the way an ad does, make sure you're subscribed. This is exactly the kind of tech that looks smart in the lab and gets ugly in the real world. Let's pull PHEVs apart. Start with what a PHEV actually is, mechanically. A plug-in hybrid is not a normal hybrid with a bigger battery. It's almost always a full internal combustion drivetrain plus a full electric drivetrain in one vehicle. Concretely, that means you have, on the internal combustion engine side, an engine, often turbocharged, a fuel system with a tank, pump, lines, and injectors, an exhaust system with catalysts, mufflers, and sometimes particulate filters, emissions hardware like EGR, SCR, O2 sensors, and NOx sensors, cooling and lubrication systems, and in many cases a traditional or semi-traditional transmission or multi-mode gearbox. On the EV side, you have a high-voltage battery, bigger than a normal hybrid, often 8 to 20 plus kilowatt hours, one or more traction motors, an inverter and power electronics, an onboard charger, and high-voltage wiring, relays, and safety systems. The only thing you save versus a pure EV is battery capacity. The only thing you save versus a pure internal combustion engine is some engine size and some mechanical load in certain scenarios. That's a lot of stuff to build, cool, control, and service. Every extra system equals more potential failure modes, more places for heat to build, more software to glitch, more parts to age out, and more combinations of, if this fails, what happens? If you're designing for durability and simplicity, that's already a red flag. Now add in weight. A plug-in hybrid is heavier than the equivalent internal combustion engine car and heavier than the equivalent non-plug-in hybrid. Battery packs, motors, extra structure, and sometimes dual exhaust or additional tanks all add weight. Extra weight means more stress on the suspension and brakes, more energy needed to accelerate, and potentially worse efficiency on the highway if you're not running electric very often. You can make up for that with electric driving if you plug in religiously, but if you don't, you're just hauling ballast. Now look at how PHEVs are actually used, not how they're supposed to be used. The ideal PHEV driver charges at home every night and maybe charges at work too. They drive mostly within the EV range, say 20 to 40 miles each way. They only burn gas on long trips, and they follow time-based service schedules, not just mileage, because the engine runs less. For that person, a PHEV can give you very low fuel use, a real EV experience most of the time, gas backup when needed, and reasonable wear on both systems. But how many people actually live like that? What happens a lot more in the wild is this. There's no home charger, maybe because they live in an apartment, rely on street parking, or just never installed one. There's occasional or rare use of public chargers. The car is mostly driven like a regular gas SUV or sedan, with the battery rarely full, and the owner stretches oil changes because the mileage on the odometer is low and it's a hybrid. In that scenario, the PHEV is a heavy internal combustion engine car plus an underused, aging EV system. This results in worse real-world fuel economy than a good full hybrid, higher purchase cost, and more complexity and risk in the long term. The engineering nightmare isn't just the hardware, it's that the entire design assumes ideal human behavior to deliver its promises. The car doesn't know if you're the disciplined type or the too tired to plug in tonight type when they sell it to you. The emissions tests don't care about your behavior either. On paper, in test cycles, the PHEV starts with a full battery and is driven over a set route. The engine barely comes on, fuel consumption is tiny, and the result is some ridiculous number like 1.3 liters per 100 kilometers, 120 plus MPGe, or up to a 90% reduction in fuel use. In reality, without regular charging, those numbers are a fantasy. We've already seen fleet studies in Europe where company-issued PHEVs were almost never plugged in, got fuel economy similar to or worse than equivalent internal combustion engine or full hybrid cars, yet still counted as near zero emissions on paper for regulations. From an engineering ethics point of view, that's a problem. You've added the battery manufacturing footprint, extra materials, and extra complexity to get numbers on a government test, not to deliver reliable, meaningful, real-world savings. Now let's talk about what PHEVs do to engines. PHEV marketing implies the engine will last longer because it's used less. That's not automatically true. Engines like stability. They like to warm up, reach operating temp, stay there for a while, and run under consistent hydrodynamic lubrication conditions. In a regular internal combustion engine car, even with some stop and go, you get substantial continuous runs. In a PHEV that's mostly in EV mode and only fires the engine intermittently, you can end up with lots of cold or cool starts, short engine run times, and long periods of sitting with oil getting older by the calendar, not by the odometer. The engine is called on only when high power is needed, like on a steep hill or full throttle with a low battery. That's a nasty combo for cold start wear and oil condition. Cold start wear is the moment when viscosity is high, oil hasn't fully reached all journals and cam lobes, and hydrodynamic oil films aren't stable yet. PHEVs can create a world of mini cold starts under light use, especially in cold climates. If owners then think, I barely use the engine, I can change oil less often, you add fuel dilution, moisture, and oxidation to the mix.
It's not hard to imagine a scenario where a PHEV's engine with 80,000 engine miles is in worse shape than a normal internal combustion engine with 120,000 miles, simply because of how those miles were accumulated. The engineer in me sees that as a design problem. You've given the engine a weird job it wasn't originally evolution tested for, and then handed it to people who think mileage on the dash is the only maintenance indicator. Then there's the dual risk at high mileage. At, say, 10 to 15 years in and 150 to 200,000 plus miles, a PHEV has to deal with everything that ages in an EV. Battery capacity loss, power electronics fatigue, and cooling loop issues for high-voltage components. Plus, everything that ages in an internal combustion engine. Engine mechanical wear, emissions hardware clogging or failure like DPF or SCR if diesel, GPF and more if gas, exhaust system corrosion, fuel system faults, and oil leaks, gaskets, seals, and timing components. And possibly everything that ages in a complex transmission, clutches, valve bodies, and mechatronics. A simple full hybrid like Toyota's hybrid Synergy drive centralizes a lot of complexity into one medium battery, a robust, low-complexity transaxle, and one inverter. The PHEV spreads high-value complexity across a larger battery, a more powerful inverter and onboard charger, an internal combustion engine plus all its subsystems, and a gearbox that must handle multiple drive modes. More systems means more things that have to not go wrong if you want low-drama ownership. Engineers love elegance, one solution that solves multiple problems with minimal moving parts. PHEVs are the opposite, layered solutions, often driven as much by regulations and marketing needs as by elegance. To be fair, when does a PHEV actually make sense? From a cold engineering perspective, a PHEV makes sense if you have guaranteed, easy access to cheap charging, like at home or maybe work. If your daily use fits comfortably within the EV range most of the time. If you are disciplined about plugging in. If you accept that the internal combustion engine still needs time-based maintenance even if you're not racking up big odometer numbers. And if you plan to keep the car through the PHEV's sweet spot years, roughly that 5 to 10 year band before both battery age and engine wear really become concerns. In that situation, you can use grid electricity for most of your miles, gasoline as a range extender and long trip backup, and the PHEV as a bridge tech until charging infrastructure or your own situation makes a full EV feasible. So PHEVs are not always a scam. They're just a scalpel sold to hammer users. The scam part is selling them as a universal solution, flashing impossible-sounding fuel numbers based on lab cycles, not demanding that real-world usage, like charging behavior and service, matches those conditions, and pretending the long-term complexity doesn't exist. From a mechanic's point of view, a clean, simple full hybrid with a small battery and a Toyota-style eCVT is a beautiful compromise. It's proven, robust, offers enough efficiency, and has fewer parts to haunt you at 200,000 miles. From an engineer's view, a well-designed full EV is also beautiful. There's no engine, no exhaust, no multi-gearbox, and fewer fluids. PHEVs sit in the worst middle if used wrong. Not simple enough to be bomb-proof, not electric enough to reap maximum EV benefits, and not internal combustion engine enough to be cheap and easy to fix into old age. So, where does that leave you? If you're choosing between a full EV, a full hybrid, and a PHEV, ask yourself, do I have guaranteed easy charging at home? Will I actually plug in almost every night, not just the first month I own it? Do I drive mostly within the PHEV's EV range every day? And do I understand that I still need to change the oil on time even if the odometer doesn't move much? If all of those are truly yes, a carefully chosen PHEV can work well for you. If any of those are probably not, a full hybrid or a well-chosen EV is almost always the better engineering choice. Hybrids quietly fix a huge chunk of city inefficiency with minimal complexity. EVs eliminate engines entirely when the environment fits. PHEVs try to be everything at once, and in the hands of average owners, they're often just over-engineered, undercharged, and over-promised. If this helped you see why plug-in hybrids need to be treated as a very specific tool, not a default smart choice, make sure you're subscribed. Next, I'm going to break down how to look at a specific PHEV on the used market, what scan data, service history, and physical checks tell you if it was driven as a real plug-in hybrid or just a very complicated gas car with a dying battery. I'm GearHead. Every drivetrain has a story, and together we're going to decode which ones are clever engineering and which ones are just complex answers to the wrong questions.